Hello, everybody. My name is Jon Moen. I'm the manager of the Commercial Services Product Management Group. Been with Midland for about a year and a half, but I've been in banking for about 25, almost now 26 years. You can read the background on the screen for me, but I'm going to turn it over to Don, let him tell a little bit more about his more exciting background.
Yeah, hi, I'm Don. Been with Midland now for 3 years as Director of Financial Crimes, overseeing anti-money laundering, fraud, and delving a little bit into the IT and physical security risk programs as well. A little bit different than John. This is my first foray into banking. Before that, I was in law enforcement in the Marines for just over 20 years. I primarily focused on cyber and financial crime investigations. During my time as a special agent with the Wisconsin Department of Justice, I was assigned to fusion centers, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and then also the FBI Cyber Task Force. So have a wealth of knowledge around what our adversaries, including nation states and our organized criminal groups, are doing to target businesses and individuals across the U.S. Before entering law enforcement, like I said, I was in the Marines, and I was assigned to the embassy in Pretoria, South Africa. So I traveled all over Africa, South America, protecting embassies across those different interests, and have a few certifications as well as a master's degree in forensic accounting. And John, we can go ahead and move on from there.
Okay, this is a list of the topics. We're actually going to bounce around. Don and I go back and forth, and we may even interrupt ourselves from time to time as well as we go through all of these different topics. But we're hoping that you're going to enjoy this on the recording, and there'll be a chance at the end to send us questions as well after we're done. So I'm going to turn it over to Don. Take it away.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, in my law enforcement career, I spent a good chunk of that time working out of a fusion center. And so for those of you who aren't aware with that term, and I know many aren't, we are very familiar with what happened on 9/11. And after the events of 9/11, we wondered as a country, how does this happen, right? Because we have some of the most advanced intelligence capabilities, law enforcement agencies throughout the U.S. that are, looking for this type of activity. So Congress tried to determine what happened, and from their report, they determined that information was not shared, analysis was not pulled, and effective operations were not launched. And so what does that mean? Well, we had a lot of different law enforcement and intelligence agencies that were looking at the bad guys, and but kind of siloing the information that they were finding. They weren't talking to each other, and so we essentially weren't able to pull our resources together to potentially stop the events of 9/11 from happening. And so then the 9/11 Commission report, what they recommended was establishing fusion centers. And what fusion centers are, they're a collaborative effort of two or more agencies. I think typically it's going to be a lot of law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies working together, often under one roof. So you might have your state agency, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and potentially other federal resources as well. And you're pulling together a lot of the expertise and information to help investigate, to detect, and potentially prevent certain type of activity. Now, when this first started, it was really focused on physical type of incidents. Think of bad guys hijacking planes. But what happened is after 9/11, the internet really became a thing. Every business nowadays has some type of profile on there, and a lot of the threats transition to more of the cyber or digital type of attacks. And when I started at a fusion center, what we really were starting to focus on is how do we start helping businesses across the U.S. Protect themselves from these type of cyber attacks. So a lot of what I did was focused on building partnerships along community, small businesses, and help them understand and bring awareness to the cyber threat landscape, so that way they could be better prepared or help prevent these type of attacks. And I say help prevent because law enforcement and intelligence agencies, they don't just magically come up with the information that helps to determine what's happening. No, it's really the boots on the ground. And by that, I mean, everybody that's working at businesses, that's seeing what's happening in their communities, seeing what's happening on their networks. They're the ones really first identifying this. And then it's when they can report that we can start helping to better prevent these type of attacks across the homeland. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the what the cyber threat landscape looks like right now, and we're going to start kind of a very high level. But boy, this is very timely, especially with what's going on in Iran. So we're recording this video on June 23rd, and this is pretty much just a few days after the events that were happening in Iran around their nuclear programs. We're already starting to see some of these nation states come together and talk about what they're going to do to kind of combat our combat what has happened at least in Iran and what they perceive as U.S. aggression against their allies. Russia has been known to conduct all kinds of cyber attacks against U.S. based interests for a long time, and oftentimes what they're doing is they're targeting businesses here in the U.S. Uh, for the most part, really that they are very capable in these type of attacks, very assertive in their operations. They have a skill set that probably rivals the US when it comes to conducting cyber attacks and cyber espionage. Very common for them to be able to get into networks, remain in there kind of in a stealth mode, and exfiltrate tons of data, tons of information, including sensitive data as well. Typically, they're using these type of attacks to influence our support their decision makers on the geopolitical side, but they're also preparing the environment for future use. And what I mean by that is, what they're looking at is if they were to come into some type of aggressive war, say with a foreign adversary, they want to be able to conduct cyber attacks against them fairly quickly. They also are very well versed in doing influence operations, so trying to influence military and political objectives across foreign nations. So well, this is one of those groups that I talk about. Typically, they're going to be focused on a lot of the larger businesses, but one of the things that we have to be very cognizant of is that they'll target vendors. So we've seen oftentimes that some of the big vendors out there that are serving small businesses across the U.S. they get targeted, and when they get compromised, that also means we could potentially, we as in small businesses, could be also facing some type of data breach or could be primed for an attack too from this particular country. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is China. Again, they have been an adversary in the cyberspace against the U.S. based interests for quite some time now. A little bit of a uh, different targeting mechanism than what Russia does. They don't necessarily have the same capabilities, but they are very well resourced. They have developed some of their own tools. Oftentimes, they'll try to have that persistent access as well. I will say though, oftentimes it's a little bit more messy or noisier when they conduct their attacks. We're typically able to see how they're doing their attacks just because of the way that they go about them. Oftentimes with China, though, they're targeting a broad spectrum of interest and really using cyber espionage as one way to really harm U.S. based interests. And I like to tell a story about in Wisconsin where we had a company up in the Madison, Wisconsin area that was developing windmills, and they had the intellectual property on that. They had all the patents, and China wanted to be able to get those blueprints so that way they could start building those windmills in mainland China and start kind of undercutting the competition. And so they weren't able to necessarily access the networks through cyber means, but what they did is they found a employee that they could bribe and go in there and access the systems and just really save the data on a flash drive. And not only did this person steal the blueprints for these windmills, but they also took contractual information. And so they figured out who this company was negotiating with. And that was also fed to the Chinese government. And then they were able to start producing these windmills in China and then undermine this company, start coming in on these contracts well under what the U.S. based company was coming in at, and they struck a lot of deals. And unfortunately, this put this business out, essentially bankrupted them. It's estimated that over $1 billion of economic activity was lost in Wisconsin because of this, and over 700 jobs as well. So when we start thinking about cyber espionage and the effects that it can have on the U.S., yeah, that's a good example of what we're dealing with here. Uh, they also, they're very good at stealing data. They have been known to steal sensitive data that was used for clearances. And so with that, they wind up attaining a lot of critical, sensitive, personally identifiable information on folks across the U.S. All right, I like to throw North Korea in here because oftentimes when we think of North Korea, they're kind of a very closed country. They're very much well known for some of the military activity they're doing, whether that's trying to build up their key critical military infrastructure, or doing activities that are somewhat hostile to the U.S. But for roughly the last decade or so, North Korea has shown that they have fairly advanced capabilities when it comes to cyber attacks. One of the first attacks that we saw involving North Korea used some of these capabilities that I listed here, using wiper elements and also targeting critical infrastructure. One of the cases that we saw with North Korea involved Sony, and when they released the movie, the Interview, which had Seth Rogen in it, and it was essentially a movie about assassinating Kim Jong-un. Of course, the North Korean government did not like that. They wanted Sony not to release the movie, and they told Sony there would be repercussions if they did release the movie. And lo and behold, when that movie was released, Sony was hit with a cyber attack by North Korean actors. Not only did they steal Sony's data, but they also used wiper elements, so they deleted a lot of data and also launched ransomware on there. Now that was over 10 years ago. Really, now the focus of the North Korean cyber attacks are focused more on supporting government interests, i.e., trying to do financial attacks in order to support the government operation. So it's a cost-effective way for them to influence and create disorder. But they're also using it as financial theft that's supporting essentially their war machine. They're using the money to fund the government to build, say, battleships and things like that. And we're seeing them operate in a way that most other nation states aren't. They're using a lot of tools like ransomware and other types of malware to conduct attacks for financial reasons. So oftentimes we don't see that with nation state actors, but this is something that the North Koreans have more recently been doing. They've been targeting small businesses across the U.S., including hospitals and healthcare providers, as this press release talks about. Again, very well capable country. They have dedicated a lot of time and resources into building their infrastructure on there. And what we're really seeing is they're operating like the next group that I'm going to talk about, organized crime groups. All right, so that's our next one, organized criminal groups. And this is really the one that, for the most part, a lot of businesses across the U.S. need to be most aware of. Uh, these kind of groups are highly technical. They have skill sets that can rival a lot of the nation states that are out there. Uh, and they're using all kinds of different tools and resources out there to conduct these attacks, including now AI, which is something that has really increased a lot of these groups' capabilities. We're all very familiar with the Nigerian print scheme, and one of the things that we always like looked at in those emails, right? Their language was terrible, a lot of grammatical errors, things like that. So, as time went on, we kind of understood, hey, these are some of the red flags that we need to be looking at in these phishing emails. But with AI, right, it increases our capabilities. Now the folks are able to use AI and create these emails that look very legitimate. Does not have any of those grammatical errors, reduces the red flags to a very minimal amount. And it also can help them too with like coding, programming. So now they're able to really come up with what I would consider non-buggy type of malware, malware that really works out well. And these groups are using a whole host of different types of malware. One of the most common ones that we see out there is ransomware. John and I are going to talk a lot more about ransomware on future slides, but um, think of these groups always are almost always financially motivated, right? They're trying to either steal personally identifiable information for financial gain. So they might be stealing that information to sell it to other organized crime groups that are going to use it to make cards or obtain credit using victim information, or they're going to use different types of malware or ransomware to get Bitcoin or other types of cryptocurrency from companies to fund their operations. And it's obviously there's a well of activity of this happening, and there's a lot of different types of exploits and tools that they're using to conduct these type of attacks. We're also seeing, and again, this is probably partly due to AI, but just also partly due to the internet. But a lot of street level crime gangs now, gangs that were more associated with, say, drug dealing, now are also turning towards cyber type of attacks. They're targeting vulnerable systems like point of sales or ATMs. We've seen it across Illinois, where ATMs have been targeted. Whether that's through jackpotting or ATM skimming. But these are pretty low-level attacks that really all the bad guys need are Google and YouTube to understand how to conduct the attacks. And then AI is obviously increasing their capabilities to conduct even more attacks. All right. So these criminal groups really becoming specialized, and how I like to frame it is these crime groups are looking at some of the most successful businesses in the US and figuring out, hey, how can we take their business models, their business operations, and introduce it into our models. And so, I'll kind of focus on ransomware groups here as a specialization. So ransomware groups, what we're seeing now is that these type of groups, they have whole teams dedicated to certain aspects of the ransomware operations, whether that's, hey, we need a team that's going to be able to go in there and send out the phishing emails, compromise the network, and then detonate the ransomware, to, hey, we need a customer support team that will kind of talk to the victim, do some of the negotiations around how much Bitcoin needs to be paid in order to get those decryption keys. And then we're even seeing it where they have more or less like a help desk type of mentality as well. So I like to tell a story with one ransomware group or with one victim that got hit with a ransomware attack. So they unfortunately, this is early on, they didn't have any backups, nothing like that to get their network back up and running. And so they had to negotiate with this ransomware group. After the negotiations, they got the decryption key, and the decryption key didn't work. So, they're trying to figure out what's going on. They reach out to this ransomware group saying, hey, what the heck? We paid you for the decryption key. It's not working. So this ransomware group said, hey, no problem. We got a help desk. We'll help you out. So they get help desk on the line here, and the person's like, yeah, I think I know why it's, or sorry, I don't know why it's not working. Can I remote into your network? Will you allow me access in your network so I could see what's going on? And this company was in a pinch. So they decided to allow this help desk person get into their network, got remote access in. He looks around and he goes, hey, did you know that you have another type of malware, and it wasn't my group. Well, we didn't put it on there, but there's more malware on your network, and that's preventing the decryption key from working. Would you like me to remove that malware? And of course, the company's like, yeah, please do it. So, this person, he cleans up their network for them. They launch the decryption key. It works. So, in this situation, it had a happy ending to an extent. I would never really suggest allowing a bad guy to remote into your network. But again, it was a very trying time for this company, and they didn't have any access to their data. But this is what we're dealing with. These groups are becoming very specialized, and they are using business models that have been successful across multiple types of industries. And it's not just ransomware. I list on their phishing as a service on the cybercrime as a service side. there's groups that will do phishing campaigns and essentially get that access into networks, and then allow the other criminal group to do whatever it is they want to do, whether it's launch malware, or steal data, or detonate ransomware. So lots of different things happening in the criminal group space, and again, very much a top threat out there for small businesses across the U.S. All right, now we're going to pivot a little bit. So we talked about the different groups out there that we needed to be worried about, but what's the extent of the problem? And unfortunately, it is a large problem. I'm sure many of you are aware. We see the news almost weekly. We're seeing some type of company being hit with some type of cyber attack, whether that's a data breach or a ransomware attack. But what is it costing us? And while that number. I wouldn't say there's a solid number out there, but what I did is I pulled information from the FBI IC3 annual report. And so IC3 stands for the Internet Crime Complaint Center. The FBI runs that. So anytime a cyber-enabled fraud event is reported to the FBI, it goes into this system. They're doing a lot of analysis around this. It's helping them conduct cyber and financial crime investigations. And also importantly for us, this gives us a baseline of what we're dealing with here. So we could see in 2024 there was just over $13 billion in cyber-enabled fraud losses. Now, this is going to be across the U.S. And also, this isn't just necessarily businesses. This is going to be businesses and individuals that have lost money through cyber-enabled fraud events. But you could see on here the top one is investments, and that makes sense. But number two, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, is business email compromise, or BEC, on there. So businesses across the U.S. Being targeted left and right, lots of different variations to business email compromise schemes. But you can see here that is a top attack that is being conducted across SMBs across the U.S. That $13 billion in losses, again, that's just what's been reported to the FBI. And by the way, this is all open source information. I didn't pull down anything top secret or anything like that for this. You could type in FBI IC3 and find these stats online. But while we don't know the true extent of the losses and how much gets reported to the FBI, I imagine that is only a fraction of the total losses that we're seeing in the U.S., because there is no requirement for businesses or individuals to report these type of situations if they've been victim to any type of crime, really, but a cyber-enabled fraud crime. Definitely don't have to report that to the FBI or law enforcement. So I imagine, I'd be shocked if this was even 30% of the losses that we're seeing across the U.S.
Yeah, and one of the questions that had come up in our one of our live sessions was, do we have to report it? And obviously, as Don said, no, you don't have to, but we strongly encourage why. And Don will talk a little bit later as to why that's so important. But I do want to talk about fraudsters. They really love you and love your business. Like Don had said on the chart before, business email compromise. This is still probably the most popular, one of the most popular ways to go after businesses. And normally what they're looking for either to get a wire payment or an ACH, something that's fast. Obviously, wires is the fastest. ACH is second fast, but same day ACH makes it almost immediate. And sometimes they're trying to pretend to be an executive. So they may know an executive is at a conference or out of the office or on a cruise ship. And so they've somehow hacked someone's individual email, or they've got some invoice or things from a vendor side, but they're trying to make it seem this is important. We've got to do it right away. And that's what they're trying to get the hook on is, you may be understanding what risks are, but think about everybody in your company who has access to the payment system and has access to the online system. The fraudster's going after the weakest link. And again, whether they're trying to impersonate another vendor of yours or they're trying to impersonate somebody at your company, whether it's a key leader or an executive, it is always, always urgent. And that's what they're trying to prey on. So an invoice is kind of like Don had talked about AI. Things are getting better, smarter. With AI, those invoices look a little bit closer, but sometimes it's kind of obvious. It says, wait a second, I've been dealing with this business in Illinois, my vendor, and all of a sudden magically they're changing to an account in New York or they're changing to an account in LA. Doesn't seem right. Don't call the phone number on the invoice, right? Call the number that you have on file for the company, because that invoice may have the fraudster's phone number on it. So you think you're calling the right person, and it's not really the case. Speaking of the phone, sometimes you can have phone calls that pretend to be a financial institution or law enforcement or licensing division or a security team. Some people have gotten the calls like Amazon that says, hey, you've got fraud in your account, and they need you to provide your credit card. Or, hey, we're the bank. We need your user ID and password just to verify because we think we have some fraudulent activity. First of all, our bank, Midland, or most other banks in the country, no one's ever going to call and ask for your user ID and password. We don't need it. We already know who you are. We already have your access set up. We'll never call you. And it's amazing how many times fraudsters still want to call and try to get credit card information or online banking credentials time and time again. Or even the other one's just like, well, we think your token may not be working correctly. Can you verify your token multiple times? Well, again, fraudsters already have access to certain data, and they're trying to break into online banking, and they need you to provide keys to the kingdom. And it's almost always high pressure tactics, and nothing is so urgent that it has to go right away. If it's a key executive and they're not there and they're at a business conference, call back someone else, talk to someone else in your company. Don't fall for business email compromise. Don't fall for phone spoofing. In a couple of the presentations we did live, I asked everybody in the room, who's gotten one of those fake texts that says you haven't paid a toll? And almost everybody raised their hand. And that's real easy because people know that that's fraud, but some people don't. And again, if it's a phone number you don't recognize, phone number you've never engaged with before, don't click on links from people that you don't know. Always go back and check the source. Always go back, talk to the phone numbers that you have, and especially if that text is, you have to do this right now. If you don't do this in 20 minutes, your online banking access is going to be shut down. That's not the way banks operate. That's not how credit cards operate. Always call the phone numbers that you have on file. It's so sad, right, that it happens. And those of you watching this recording, I'm less worried about you than I'm worried about other folks in your organization. And how do we make sure that everybody in the company has got access to the payment system? Everybody who has access to critical data that they don't fall for, whether it's text or phones. But business email compromise is still the favorite target because everybody's got email, everybody has access, and that's what they're heading after. Don?
Yeah. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what happens if you do become a victim, especially to a business email compromise. This is one of the one of the ways that the financial fraud kill chain can come into play here. A lot of people haven't heard of this, the financial fraud kill chain, and I like to kind of describe it as an FBI program that helps companies get money back from a fraudulent incident, especially from, like, say, a business email compromise. So the financial fraud kill chain, if that is initiated, we see here that there's a pretty high success rate that wires can be stopped and the money frozen and eventually returned to the victim. Again, it's not well known out there. There's only about 3,000 plus that were filed in 2024, but that accounted for over almost $850 million in attempted theft. And you can see here, for money that went to domestic banks, over 460 million was recovered, and then on the international side, which is really where it becomes very difficult for banks and institutions domestically to get money frozen and returned. They have almost just over 90 million that was returned. So how does the financial fraud kill chain work? So if your company has been victim to a cyber-enabled type of fraud, and money is out the door, if you can, it needs to be reported to FBI IC3. And again, you could Google that and figure out, get to the website there. It's a web form that's submitted. That's step one. Get that IC3 report done. Once that's done, then they could start working on trying to stop the money from either leaving the bank that it's currently at, or sometimes there might be some hops there, and they can help with stopping the money at those hops. Now, timeliness is key here, though. So that 66% success rate, as time goes on, it goes lower and lower. And in fact, after about 72 hours, I would say it's about a 0% success rate that the funds are going to be stopped and frozen and potentially returned to you. What I always suggest is if you could do it right away, especially within, say 24 to 48 hours, you're going to have a much stronger success rate or a stronger chance of getting that money frozen and returned to you. Now, what can we do at Midland to help you with this? We get it. Oftentimes, there's going to be, your hair's on fire when these type of situations arise. We've worked with our clients with submitting that IC3 report, whether that's like kind of directing them where to go and to file the report, or doing it on the company's behalf with their authorization. So we've done it both ways. We're very familiar with submitting those reports. And the other key aspect of this too is we know a lot of these attacks, it's going to be Friday at 3 o'clock when they happen. Like, unfortunately, that seems to be prime cyber enabled crime attacks, Friday at 3. So, just like public sector entities, FBI staffing might be a little bit lighter on Friday, especially Friday afternoon. People are, on vacation, maybe leaving early, things like that. So we could also help with making sure that process gets expedited by contacting our sources across, our geographic footprint. I still have a lot of contacts on the FBI. And I think it's very key here to get an agent involved as soon as possible, because once it gets to IC3, again, that's step one. Their analyst is going to look at it and figure out which primary office or area of responsibility does this fall under, and then they're going to, farm that report on. So I could kind of, or we at Midland can quicken that pace for you, and again help with meeting those timelines and potentially getting the funds back to you. All right, now we're going to talk about ransomware trends. Uh, Ransomware, it's been around for quite a while now. Initially, really, it was targeting individuals, but again, why target home users that might only have a limited amount of money when you could target businesses that have, lot more dollars available, and insurance that might pay out the bad guys as well. So we saw a huge transition in, probably about, I would say, almost 15 years ago, with the organized crime groups or gangs targeting businesses with different types of ransomware. And how it really started, those initial attacks, the bad guys would get access to the business's network, usually through phishing email. And that's still kind of tried and true today. I would say between phishing and spear phishing, that's going to be the vector of attack for most of the different types of cyber crimes that we're talking about here. And then once they would get in, though, they would detonate the ransomware almost immediately. It wasn't uncommon to see within minutes of successful phishing attempt, either link was clicked or an attachment was open, that you would start seeing signs of ransomware infection. Now, that worked out for a long time for these bad guys. Companies were not prepared for that. They either didn't have backups or they had backups on their network, digital or virtual backups that also would get encrypted as well in these type of attacks. So of course, we evolved. Businesses started having air-gapped or off-site backups, just better ways of mitigating these type of attacks. And so then the ransomware groups, they also evolved. And so now what we're seeing is typically hack and leak type of situation. So now when the bad guys compromise a network, they're not going in there and launching ransomware immediately. What they typically do is they stay in that network, and they try to move laterally, figure out where they could go, and figure out what data they have access to. And then they take that sensitive data, and you'll see it. They'll pull it on one portion of the network, and then they send that off to their site. So they steal the data, the company's data, and then shortly after that is when we're seeing the ransomware detonate. And oftentimes with this now, instead of just saying, "Hey, you have to pay this," right? That they know that most companies have a backup now, so they're trying to give a little bit more of a carrot to force folks to pay the ransom. And so they'll maybe sometimes call the C-suite, tell them, "Hey, we stole the data." Maybe provide a little bit of a sample. They might even go to a public leak site and post on there, a small sample of what they've stolen. And things like that have very much become the norm. they've also contacted customers and vendors of the business and letting them know, hey, we were able to exfiltrate a bunch of this company's data as well as detonate ransomware. So really making it difficult for these companies to handle these type of situations and forces them just a little bit more to have to pay that ransom. Uh, Typically, what the ransomware groups are saying is, if you pay this ransom, hey, we won't post any more of the data that we have. We'll delete it. Now, I have seen it where some of these ransomware groups, even after they got the payment and they said that they wouldn't post the data of the company, they wound up doing it 6 to 9 months later. So again, not necessarily a group of folks that you want to trust when in these type of situations. All right, so what's the mitigation techniques out there? A lot of the stuff we've heard about. The first thing I want to talk about is, make sure that you're well prepared against phishing, spear phishing, those type of attacks, right? Because again, that's going to be the vast majority of how these are successful. There's going to be some type of email with a malicious attachment or malicious link, and next thing you know, there's ransomware on your network. So I highly suggest you start there when you think about how to prevent. Now, on the mitigation standpoint, you know, we talked about backups earlier. Again, that's going to be key here, but make sure they're air gapped. Make sure you're testing them. And the other thing too is if you do find yourself in a ransomware situation, not uncommon for businesses now to uh, when they upload their backup, uh, they find that hey, either the ransomware spreads again or there's some other type of malware on there, and that's because these ransomware groups, right? They're getting on there and they might be staying on the network for 30 plus days. And so they know that, hey, these backups now, we'll create a backdoor or we'll put malware on there that'll essentially allow us to get back on there and spread ransomware again. So make sure before going to a backup, you're testing that, ensuring that it's clean. There's no malware on there, no backdoors that are going to allow the bad guys to get right back onto your network and detonate ransomware. Well, some of the other things too that I want to talk about on here, and I'll start kind of on the lower right there, the cyber insurance. Make sure you have cyber insurance that's going to cover you in the event of a ransomware situation. And then, I always recommend too, think about you have the appropriate coverage. With some of these ransomware incidents, again, a lot of times now they're also data breaches. So you got to think about, hey, do we have to make notifications and things like that? And that can get costly quickly because now you're talking about providing credit monitoring to your clients or your customers. You're also going to have to potentially do notifications, and it might be, say, via mail, and so that can get costly. So just think about that and ensure, work with your broker that you have the appropriate coverage in place in the event of a ransomware incident. And then have an incident response and recovery plan in place, and make sure you're going over that. I highly recommend at least annually you're kind of rehearsing and going through that plan to ensure that you are ready in the event of a ransomware incident. The other thing too, can't stress this enough, make sure you have a physical copy of this incident and recovery plan. Because if it's on your network and that gets encrypted, now suddenly you don't have access to it. You're gonna have to try to remember from memory what are we supposed to do here. So take a copy of that, make it get a physical copy of it. Keep it in the office, and you can use that as your playbook. But tabletop exercise is also a good way to kind of rehearse your incident and recovery plan. I know, John, you'll talk a little bit more about the benefits of that. But yeah, again, something else you'll want to consider for these type of situations.
And Don, real quick, just for some of our audience, they don't know what air gap means. Can you go in just a 30-second
Yeah.
explanation of what you mean by air gap, please?
Yeah, so really a system that's air gapped, it's not touching the internet. At least it's not, on the internet, constantly. Because if it's touching the internet, right, there's potentially uh, uh, a situation where the bad guys can get in there. It could be an unpatched vulnerability like that's listed up there, a 0-day vulnerability that would allow access. So keeping a backup that's, not online, or at least not online, 24/7, and with that has some vulnerabilities. But
Thanks,
good
Don.
question. Yeah, thanks, John. All right. So talked about data breaches, and now we're, again, oftentimes now data breaches are also associated with ransomware attacks, but not all the times. In fact, probably more often than not, we're seeing data breaches happen without ransomware because they're so easy. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that they can happen. I really want to talk about that second bullet point on there, third parties and vendors, because what we've seen is that there's a lot of these data breaches that are occurring not because, say, your business was compromised, but it's your vendors that get compromised. So, take into consideration what is the cybersecurity posture of your third parties and vendors that you're working with? Are you asking for SOC reports? Are you asking questions around their cybersecurity policies and procedures? And then also think about what you have what the contractual obligations for reporting are. Oftentimes, very general language has been used around vendors, and if they suffer a data breach involving your information and your data, it was something like, within a reasonable amount of time. Well, what is that? Reasonableness might mean something completely different to me than you. Might be mean something different to you, and it definitely means something differently to your vendor. So I always suggest try to come up with like a hard timeline there. So say, within 48 hours of them determining that a data breach has occurred with your information or data, they're reporting it to you. And I say do that because you could find yourself in a situation where, say, a cybersecurity researcher is out there, right, monitoring all these different dump websites where data is being just, posted to, or maybe he's in certain chat groups with these companies, and so then they're writing their reports, they're posting them online. You don't want to find out via, some obscure cybersecurity reporter out there that essentially your data has been compromised and is either being sold or posted on the dark web. So make sure you strengthen that language a little bit more. And a lot of different steps here you're going to want to think about when you're protecting your data. Encryption is going to be key here. You want your data encrypted at rest and in transit, but also think about your laptops. If you have a lot of, say, remote employees or employees that are using laptops, are those encrypted? Because it's not that hard for us, for someone to maybe be working at an airport or a coffee shop and either leave their laptop sitting on the desk, they look away and it's gone, right? You want to make sure that you have encryption on there so that way the bad guys can't go in there and pull all the sensitive data that's off of there. Um, and then again, key really that fifth bullet point there. Make sure you're educating your staff on phishing and social engineering tactics. Phishing is going to be key again because that's going to be where a lot of the attacks are coming from. And then social engineering. I mean, it happens all the time. We deal with it constantly, kind of like what John talked about. One form of that social engineering, right, is to send mass text messages and try to get someone to respond that they to a text that they haven't paid their tolls. So there's also some physical ones that I'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about some of the general best practices on there. All right, and one other one that really ebbs and flows and it's an attack that unfortunately small businesses in particular have fallen victim to, but extortion type of emails. And as you'll notice on here, the bad guys sometimes they go with what's old is new, right? So that they're using the mail system to also try to conduct some of these extortion threats. Where I've seen it previously, especially about, roughly in the last decade or so, there's a lot of, organized crime groups out there that have capabilities that, are for what it's worth amazing, right? That I mean, they're able to almost compromise any company's network. And so other organized crime groups without those type of capabilities, they kind of latch on and they say, hey, we can't do what they're doing, but we can pose as them. And so when I first saw one of these attacks, there was a group out there called Lizard Squad. And they were really good with doing denial of service attack, distribute denial of service attacks, which means they could knock down like the websites of a lot of companies. And I mean, some of the biggest corporations were targeted by them, and their websites would be down for hours and hours. So think of the revenue that's lost when a website goes down for 6, 7, 8 hours. Um, so other groups, so they weren't able to do that, but what they did is they would pose as them, and so then they would send emails to small businesses saying, "Hey, we're Lizard Squad, and if you don't pay us X amount of Bitcoin by this date, we're going to conduct an attack, denial of service attack against you." Unfortunately, small businesses would be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, we don't want to get attacked, so we'll go ahead and pay them." Oftentimes, it wasn't a huge sum. It might only be a couple of thousand or several $1,000s. So businesses, kind of took a very cautious approach and paid them. Well, then Lizard Squad, all the members got arrested through international law enforcement. So they were serving time in prison, and these extortion emails kept coming. It was like, well, obviously this group does not have access in prison to conduct these attacks. So we knew, hey, there was nothing to it. But we still keep seeing these type of attacks come. And so, more recently, we're seeing now a mail scam involving this where businesses are being mailed physical letters saying, hey, if you don't do what we're asking you, pay this within, I think on like this letter was like 10 days from receipt, we're going to attack you. I always say, don't pay these. I don't think there's going to be much merit to it, but you do want to ensure that you have a plan in place for this. Make sure you notify key personnel. Whether that's executives or perhaps if you have public relations, marketing, things like that. Because we have seen it where these will go public. Whether it's Twitter or X. Uh, and so you might want to be able to have just some type of be ready to send out some type of communication, letting your customers know, hey, we're aware of it, and we're prepared for it. And of course, you want to make sure that you're have logging and monitoring suspicious activity within your network to ensure that there isn't any merit to it, that you're okay. And I always suggest to avoid paying the fraudsters, but notifying law enforcement so that way they're aware of this. Because more than likely, if you're receiving either a notification like this via digital means or via the mail, that probably means there's some other businesses right down the street from you that are also receiving this, and so we can kind of save other U.S. Companies from potentially falling victim to this. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the general cybersecurity best practices here. We're not going to go into all of these, but I do want to talk about one, and it kind of goes back to my days in the Marines around physical security, because I think now this often gets overlooked when we think of security, especially if it's cyber-enabled crime. We're almost always just thinking of what we could be doing from either network or perimeter level, maybe application security. But I want to talk about physical security. Um, think about what you have in place to protect your server. If you have on-prem servers, think about how you're protecting those. Is it just in a room, unlocked door, anybody has access to, right? That's the keys to your kingdom. So, think of it in that sense. If someone can get in there, they can do all kinds of different attacks against you. So, is that room locked? Are you monitoring who's going in there? And then the other thing too is, think about how your businesses are set up. Can someone just kind of come in and meander around and walk around? Again, this can pose a lot of serious issues, especially if that server room is open. But think about your endpoints, so your laptops and your computers that your employees are using. Not that hard if you have open access for someone to walk in there and say just plug a thumb drive into the device that might start tracking keyboard strikes and or potentially launch some type of malware. So again, really think about that. Social engineering can play a big piece in this. We've seen bad guys pose as not just customers, but hey, as government officials or poses like law enforcement to get access into these businesses to launch these type of attacks. And of course, be cognizant of any type of situation where thumb drives are just being kind of strategically planted around your parking lots, your inside your building. We've seen it where attackers have put thumb drives in parking lots and put payroll on there. And of course, you get folks that are like, well, shoot, I kind of want to see, what people are being paid here. And then they plug it in, and unfortunately, it opens the door for some type of malware attack. So again, physical security, don't leave that out when you're thinking of cybersecurity. A couple other best practices I want to talk about, multi-factor authentication. Highly recommend that. And in fact, while a text-based multi-factor authentication, I think is at least sufficient. I think a stronger case can be made to use like an authenticator app, whether that's through Microsoft or Google, some type of product like that. That's really going to enhance your security measures. Uh, Passwords. I very much encourage folks to use a password manager. Um, it's not uncommon for people to recycle passwords, right? So, you know, people are going to use the same password for their email, for their access to their login credentials for their business access. So, when these data breaches happen, the bad guys are seeing that. They know that, hey, it's very common for folks to recycle passwords. And so they could do just a little bit of due diligence, right? They can look on LinkedIn and see, hey, Don, he works at Midland States Bank. This is a password he's using. Figure out the domain. Let's try that password and see if it works. And unfortunately, it does. So using a password manager is going to give you very strong passwords, and it's going to eliminate that recycling situation that I just talked about. Of course, want to be backing up data, very critical, especially for mitigating ransomware type of attacks. And then, for those companies out that are really looking kind of like the future, what's kind of cutting edge from a cybersecurity perspective, zero trust networks. That's kind of right now kind of the top tier cybersecurity um, measure that you could take, but it is very costly. If you're interested in that, I encourage you. You can Google it. A lot of top tier cybersecurity companies are providing that type of setup and infrastructure for companies. But again, it is very costly. And of course, be prepared. Do those tabletop exercises. Have appropriate policies and procedures and governance in place, and work with groups when you can. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at a future slide about the other groups you can be working with to help enhance your cybersecurity.
Thanks, Don. So we're going to play a video for you now on check fraud, and we'll be back in a few seconds.
Businesses reported in a short period of time their bank accounts being compromised.
Investigators were able to track those reports to a certain area.
The suspects in this case intentionally targeted business checks. They would often go to commercial business parks where they would be able to find a number of different checks.
The three suspects were stealing the checks, then using an elaborate process for duplication.
Using fairly sophisticated software, computer equipment, they would scan these checks and print out all brand new counterfeit versions of these checks on blank check stock.
Essentially gathering all of the vital information on a check.
They would scan all the information on that check to include the company logo, the account number, and then the routing number of that check.
They would then recruit individuals with an ID to cash the new check. The system worked for a while, until one of the check cashers realized they were being used. Inspectors caught up with the suspects, but not before thousands of dollars in losses. Some simple advice for small business owners.
Never leave outgoing checks in a mailbox to be picked up by a carrier.
Outgoing mail with checks inside should always be left in a secure blue mailbox or at the post office.
Okay. Want to talk about that video. In the video, it mentioned about the blue mail drop boxes as a place to drop off your checks and other things that you need to mail. In St. Louis, around my area, actually those blue boxes are being removed because postal keys have been stolen and duplicated. So we're seeing a lot of those postal mailboxes go away. So I do recommend that if you do have mail, to go either give it to the mail carrier directly or to be able to drop it off inside the post office at one of the drop boxes inside the post office because the mailboxes are actually being removed. It's also sad to hear, more so on the coast, both East and West Coast, in the news, that postal workers have been attacked. And again, they're stealing those keys. Why are they stealing all the mail? Because they want to be able to reproduce those checks, as well as they also like to steal credit cards before they've become activated, and then activate them so they can go on a shopping spree. In a perfect world, would love to say stop writing checks, but that's not realistic. But it would really be great if everyone would say, hey, let's stop writing checks and let's do all electronic payments, safer than using the mail. But okay, so let's say you're not going to write, or you're not going to be able to stop writing checks. How can we help? So one of the ways to protect all of your checks is by using Payee Positive Pay. Midland offers this, and most other banks around the country do. It's a really great service to help prevent fraud. So one of the things that you do as a business is you provide us the serial number, the payee, the date of the check, and the amount. You provide that to us. You can either key it into online banking, send us a file from one computer system to the other through direct transmission, or you can upload a file multiple times a day or once a day if necessary into the online channel to provide that information to the bank. Then at nightly processing, we're going to get all the checks that come through, and we're going to compare it against your list that you provided to us. And we're only going to notify you if there's an exception. So if something doesn't match the payee, or the dollar amount doesn't match, or we see a check that you didn't tell us anything about, you get to decide whether to pay or return. You'll know whether or not that's fraud or not. You don't have to come into the bank. You don't have to sign an affidavit. And that's one of the benefits about Payee Positive Pay is you can make the decision right from your desktop. Or if you've got a mobile device and you're out and about at a business conference or something else, and no one else is in the office because there's a bad winter storm, you can do it remotely on your phone as well. Again, no requirement to drive into the bank, no affidavit to sign, really easy. It gets taken care of first thing in the morning. You can also have a default decision be set. So if for some reason you can't get to it, you can have those checks automatically returned, or you can automatically have them pay if you don't look at them. But most commonly, there's always someone at the business every morning to look at any exceptions. If there's no exceptions, business as usual, don't need to worry about anything. So that's great for the check side now, but what about the electronics of where a business may be debiting you? You may have a lease for the office building that you're using, or you may have a company car or some other lease that you have on equipment, farming equipment or otherwise, where you're allowing that vendor to auto debit your account. Well, most businesses don't always realize that they don't have the same protections as consumer. Not to mention, you also want to protect any unauthorized debits from coming through, aka fraud. So similar to Payee Positive Pay, there's ACH Positive Pay. You provide a list of the companies and the ACH IDs they're going to debit you, and the ABA routing number where it's coming from. In some cases, you can also set a max dollar amount if you want as well. Those are optional. But anything that comes through that's on your approved list, again, business as usual, just comes right through. But if there's some business that comes through as a debit and you don't recognize, and it's fraudulent, you can go ahead and return. Again, no reason to have to come into the bank to sign an affidavit. Don't need to travel in. You can have default decisions. So if it's not on your list, it can automatically be returned. Again, these decisions can be done on a phone. They can be done on a desktop, laptop, etc. Doesn't matter where. Almost all banks in the country offer it. Some banks don't, but most of them do. It's a great way to protect your business from any unauthorized activity. The other great part about it is if there's a new company that you started doing business with and they haven't given you the ACH ID, when that transaction does come through, if you verify it's a legitimate transaction, you can add that to now your approved list. So going forward, it won't be something that alerts you. Again, nice way to prevent issues on the fraud space. But let's say you did have fraud, and I'm not just talking about the checks or ACH, but all sorts of fraud, whether it's data breach or ransomware, etc. Don's going to talk about, once you had the fire and you tried to put the fire out, what should you do? So Don?
Yeah, so we mentioned FBI's IC3 program, and one of the big benefits, right? That could start if you have lost money, that could start that financial fraud kill chain. So very important. But then also, that really gives us the lay of the land of what's happening here. So, really important when you think about, hey, how do we come up with where should we be directing resources to combat these type of fraudulent situations or cyber crime attacks? So getting that information reported to IC3, very helpful. Now, also, FBI just as a whole, right? They're going to be one of the lead criminal investigative agencies for these type of situations. And I'll throw Secret Service in there as well, because they will investigate certain types of financial and cybersecurity crimes, especially if there's like counterfeit money, things like that involved. So if you're looking to, for justice to bring these bad guys to trial, that they could be one of the lead agencies to help with that. The other agency on the cybersecurity perspective is Homeland Security's CISA program, or the cybersecurity or Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency. They can help you with all kinds of things. So if you're an organization that fits within this what's been identified as the 16 critical infrastructure categories, and I don't know them all off the top of my head, but again, that's something that you can Google. They offer a lot of free services. And by the way, about 80% of organizations across the U.S., I think it is, if I remember correctly, falls under critical infrastructure. You can get free cybersecurity assessments through them. They'll also do weekly website monitoring for you, or scans, to ensure that there's no vulnerabilities there. So again, a lot of free resources there. They'll come in and do tabletop exercises too for you. Again, it's a free resource. I know it comes out of our tax dollars, but still, very, very wise to use that if you can. We at Midland, we've used a few of their service offerings and thought very highly of them. Fusion Center is another situation too, where you might want to leverage them. In Illinois, we have the primary Fusion Center in Springfield, and then there's also one in Chicago. Missouri also has a couple of Fusion Centers as well, one located in St. Louis area. And then I throw local law enforcement on here, because that situation I was talking about from a physical security standpoint. Maybe you have someone that's like just walking around. It shouldn't be inside your building, just walking around. Either that's inside or maybe outside in your parking lot. I always highly suggest call local law enforcement. You don't know what the intent of that person is. Have them deal with that person and assess what's going on there. You just never know if the person is armed, what their intent is and what they're capable of. So, call 911 in that type of situation. Get law enforcement out there right away. The other thing too, think about like evidence during your cleanup. And I know, your hair's on fire. You're just trying to get your networks back up and running, or get back to a clean state. Well, that's great, and I always encourage that. But if you are wanting to report this stuff or work with like a federal agency for potential like prosecution, arrest, things like that, evidence is going to be key. So it wasn't uncommon for me to come into an organization and say, hey, we got hit with ransomware. We took some photos from our cell phone. Here's what we dealt with, and that's all they have to provide me. So I don't have anything the logging activity. So what was the infection vector? What type of ransomware it was, like what was the Bitcoin address, or where were they trying to direct them to on the dark web? And so things like that are very important for tracking these groups, figuring out what type of how they're conducting their attacks. And again, this could be beneficial for other organizations across the U.S. and it can be beneficial for you as well, because you really want to understand, how did we fall victim to this attack? You want to make sure that you're going to be implementing the appropriate controls in the future. And again, all of that being said, it can be very helpful to assist law enforcement intelligence agencies. This can help with stopping future type of cyber attacks.
Okay, switching gears, let's talk about controls within your company. It was amazing to talk to a lot of people at our in-person events about online access. How many people in your organization have access to view online, to transact, to approve? Some businesses let their accountants have access. Well, they don't necessarily need to transact or to approve transactions. So have you reviewed who has access to your online channel? Does everybody with approved capability, do they need it? Again, think about the weakest link. If everybody in your organization that has access to the online channel has the ability to view, transact, and approve, then all you need to do is have one of those folks become compromised, whether it be malware through business email compromise or other situations. But you want to review your access. The other thing maybe is, what happens if someone's left the company? They could have retired, they could have won the lottery, Or what happens if they were fired and they were a bad employee? Well, double check their access. Their access should have gone away the minute they got fired. So go take a look on a regular periodic basis or talk with your bank about who has access to the online channel. It's important to segment who can view, who can transact or approve. In some cases, they may have access to everything, but it's a good way to just go back through and look at the controls within your company about who has access. The same thing if you think about going into the branch, so getting cash out of the teller line or ATM debit card uses, who's authorized to sign for the accounts? Who's authorized to sign for loans? Have you done a periodic review? Again, may have company employees that have changed. Maybe their roles are different within the company. So not only looking at the online side, but also who can come into the bank, who's authorized to sign. Third thing I like to mention is payment limits. So this could apply to online, this could apply to cards, etc. How much money can be spent? So let's say you're a business that you only do wires of less than $1 million. Well, why do you have a 5 million or 10 million or $20 million limit? We can lower that limit, or your bank can lower your limit to something that's reasonable for your size company. Then again, same thing. If you've got a bookkeeper that only deals with one set of books, why do they have the largest limit within the company to be able to spend money and send money out? So take a look at that from a payment limit perspective, both at the company and at the user level. That would be for ACH, for wire, for bill pay, credit cards, debit cards, etc. Last thing is probably the most important, and Don talked about this earlier as well, is dual control. So dual control, if you have ACH wires or other things, one person creates the payment, another person approves it. It's really great in the sense of, let's say you get that vendor invoice that changed. And again, someone you've always paid with, you paid out of Chicago and all of a sudden now they're New York or LA, but that doesn't seem normal. Sometimes by having dual control, you're going to catch these things that says, wait a second, that company changed. I don't remember them changing. Are you sure that's okay? This is where it's really supposed to go. So dual control, I like to think of it as a second set of eyes, good best practice. You can even also do that for setup. So with online access, you can build sub-users within your company, maybe a control in IT, may be done by the owner, may be done by the CFO. Every organization is different, but whoever does setups for additional employees, is that subject to dual control? And it should be. Again, these are settings that most online banking platforms have the ability to have dual control for the additional user setup, and we do highly recommend that. So we recommend the dual control for ACH and wire and bill pay. We also recommend dual control for user setups as well. So these are all different types of controls, and I know we had a few questions in the group about that, and I've tried to cover all of those topics. But if there's a question on any of the controls within your company, talk internally. And if there's a question for Midland, we'll be happy to take questions after the seminar is over. But one of the things I want to mention is, as a kid, why do we practice tornado drills and fire drills in school, right? It's to make it less scary. And tornadoes are scary. Fires are scary. We do practice all the time. So I think of this in terms of your own company. Have you performed a self-audit or a paid audit if you originate ACH? How do you look at all of your payment vectors that you use? Are you prepared in case there was fraud? If I jump right down to the bottom, it says fraud events. Ask your team, what if, right? What if this happens? How would we handle it? If we have a game plan, it makes this a lot less scary. So going back to the payment side, right? If you accept credit card payments, are you PCI compliance? Most of the time people say, oh, my vendor takes care of that. Have you talked to the vendor? Do you understand what PCI compliance is to protect your card network? And then also, as a business, and I'm talking to a lot of different businesses around the country, you don't have the same protections as a consumer. If I have someone unauthorized debit my account, I've got 60 days as a consumer. On business, you've got 48 hours. So that's one of the reasons why ACH Positive Pay is so beneficial for businesses. It's a way to combat that differences between business and consumers. You've only got 48 hours for unauthorized ACH debit, so it's important. But again, going back to the theme of this is be prepared. It makes it a lot less scarier if you go through these tabletop exercises like Don talked about. Sometimes, again, those of you watching this video or those who had attended live in person, I less worry about you because you understand that, but think about everybody in your company. Are you doing scenarios with them? Are you educating them? Are they prepared? What if this happens? What if the organizer, what if the CEO and the top level staff is out at a business conference and something like this happens? What do they do? How do they handle it? Again, make it a lot less scary for that. So I'm going to turn over to Don to give some sort of forward-looking thoughts and wrap us up.
Yeah, and actually, before I get into that, that reminds me, good point, John. We kind of skipped over, when those folks or what the folks are posting on social media. So maybe you want to tackle that first. I'll tackle the out of office thing though. So make sure you're cognizant of what you're posting on your out of office response. That could be a treasure trove of information for bad guys. So oftentimes, or I've seen it quite a few times where executives are posting, "Hey, I'm going to be at this conference from this date and time." Things like that. And so then the bad guys know that, and they're using that information then to conduct these business email compromises because they'll put the pressure tactics like John talked about that. Hey, I'm in the conference in the session right now. I need you to send this wire right now. Stuff like that. So be really cognizant of what you're posting on there. On Outlook, anyways, I know you can have like what's posted internal, which you can be a little bit more open about what you're doing there, but that external one, you don't want to put everything that you're doing because that's just going to be a lot of information for bad guys and helps them conduct these attacks. John, maybe you want to talk about the social media part.
Yeah, social media is a good one. If you think about it, right, let's say you're going on a cruise to Alaska or a cruise to the Caribbean, wherever it may be, you're going on a cruise. And everyone is this day and age of like instant gratification, instant posting of, hey, here's where we were this day, here's where we're that day. Well, if you think about it, if you're on a 10-day cruise, right, it's not hard to figure out you're going to be gone for 10 days and you post, hey, this is us leaving out of Fort Lauderdale. This is us leaving out of Seattle. Well, guess what? Fraudsters can access social media too. They know you're gone for 10 days. So now all of a sudden when you're in Alaska and you're somewhere remote or you're in the Caribbean and you can't get a cell phone tower, you can't get a text message back, all of a sudden, oh, hey, I forgot to do this wire. I forgot to do this. You got to do this right away. I'm in port for the next 3 days. Well, guess what? Why did this is really the person because nobody else, the fraudsters wouldn't know you're gone for 3 days. They do. So as much as we love instant gratification, wait and post all the cool pictures on Facebook or other social media platforms till you get back. I know everyone wants to know like pictures. They want to see it. They want to stay connected to you, but it's not going to kill you if you wait until the day you return. And so it's a good point. And I know we talked a little bit about this in some of our live sessions, and people were guilty of it. And I'm also a little guilty of that as well. But it's really a good reminder. And this is where that business email compromise comes back in: is the fraudsters are getting smarter. They're playing off of our sort of our social media aspects. And again, the cruise ship is probably the most critical because a lot of times you're out of communication and that's when they need to reach you. And so I would just advise posting pictures on social media of a long trip. And it could not only just be a cruise ship, it could be somewhere, abroad, someplace where you may not have the same connection where you're normally in your own backyard.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. And hopefully that's a good takeaway for everybody, because I think at any given point, most of us have been guilty of doing something similar to that. So we'll wrap it up here real quick. I know we're probably at time or maybe even a little bit over. So just a few of the threats and opportunities out there. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but the two big ones: artificial intelligence. We talked about how that's helping the bad guys. So definitive threat, but there's a huge opportunity for businesses of all industries to leverage AI, especially from an operational efficiency standpoint, things like that. But with that opportunity, make sure you have the appropriate governance in place. You should have policies and procedures wrapped around that. Your employees should know how they're using, or what the use cases for AI are, kind of what those guardrails are. And then more importantly, if you're using it for your business, make sure that you have kind of an enterprise type of setup or a closed loop type of solution that you're using. And what I mean by that is you don't want to just use the open source version of OpenAI, because now that data you're putting in there, that's being used for their algorithms, and there is potential that data could be pulled down. So you don't want to give, say, your competitors or the bad guys an advantage because they know how to leverage AI to get that information. The next one, quantum computing. Now, a lot of debate when this is going to actually go into effect, but let's just face it, at some point, could be, in the next year, might be 5 years down the road. Quantum computing is kind of like going from, remember those old computers in the 70s that took up a whole room, to current day supercomputing? Well, it'll go from our computing now to even more enhanced supercomputing. And why that could be a huge threat for us is because that's going to allow bad guys to be able to defeat encryption, our encryption methods, quite quickly. So now, it might take 100+ years, say, to crack passwords and encryption keys. With quantum computing, it might only take a matter of seconds when that goes live. So think about how that's going to play into your business, and also remember your vendors too. So you might want to be talking to your vendors about what their plans are to combat quantum computing. And then last, I want to talk about the cavalry, right? What we can be doing to help secure or help enhance our cybersecurity posture. A lot of people are familiar with InfraGard, but I've noticed not a whole lot of our clients are. So phenomenal program. It's a FBI private sector partnership. Free to join. There is a background check that's done on folks, and companies can have multiple people join InfraGard, but they're going to be getting a lot of the intelligence information that's out there around cybersecurity and physical security threats. Great networking opportunities, free training, things of that nature. Again, I highly encourage you to look that up. Something else, you could just kind of FBI InfraGard, Google that. It'll get you where you need to go. But great program to help enhance your capabilities. And then ISACs, which stands for Information Sharing and Analysis Centers. A lot of different industries have stood up ISACs. For instance, in banks, there's the Financial Services ISAC, but there's many different ones out there. Again, something that you can Google, see if your company falls within those ISACs. Some are free to join, some might have a bit of a charge for it. But again, great networking opportunities, also ability to get other types of information products that can help you secure your network. And of course, don't forget, last but not least, Midland. Jon and I and our teams at Midland, we're here to help you. So if you find yourself in a fraudulent situation or a cybersecurity situation, we will do what we can to help you navigate through that. Jon and I mean, we've gotten on calls with folks when they've experienced situations, and on the teams that I lead, especially the fraud team, we've helped with submitting those FBI IC3 reports or getting an agent involved with the company. So, it just kind of takes one step away from you when you're in the thick of it, trying to recover from these type of situations. So again, we're here to help you, leverage the contacts that I have, leverage the contacts Jon has, to help better protect you and help mitigate some of these threats.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks for attending today. Don and I had a lot of questions from different folks in the rooms when we presented, and I'll just say on my side, with all of our different treasury management officers around the area, a lot of them will get questions afterwards, even after we presented in local markets, and so that's great. So happy to connect through with your local relationship manager or treasury management officer in any way we can. So, but thanks for attending today, and look forward to working with you in the future.